So hello everyone, welcome back to Danske UNI and welcome back to the Agile topic that we're discussing in Danske UNI. Just this time we want to make it a bit different. This time we're not only presenting one lecture on the Agile theme, we're presenting the whole series of lectures. So there will be 5 lectures that we will be posting about Agile, trying to slice them down into different subtopics and introducing them in a more variety and a broader perspective to all of you. So stay tuned, not only today, but to the upcoming videos that will be presented by myself and my colleagues about Agile. And today, as this is the very first lecture, we want actually to start from the very beginning, and we want to give an overview to you about what is empirical way of working in general. So lecture number 1 will be about empirical way of working. Now, as you might remember from the first lecture, empirical way of working is actually when we work in iterations, trying to move up to the standards of what our clients is expecting from us. So this is the whole basics of today, but I just want to rewind to even a bit of a bigger past, so to introduce you how this came to be actually. So I want to give you a bit of history, a bit of perspective to understand why empirical way of working is actually important today. So first of all, I want to start our journey, our history here with a company and a person called Henry Ford. Probably you heard about it. And what is Henry Ford actually famous about, and what the Ford company is famous about, probably you should also know, is that, well, they were the first ones who actually standardized and created standards of manufacturing. So the first step was to actually boosting the efficiency of a production line of Ford company by introducing clear standards and a sequential way of assembling a car. And this was very efficient and very important for that time. That was back in beginning of end of 19th, beginning of 20th century. So at that time, this was a huge boost to the efficiency. Then came another Henry Gantt, which you might also heard about. At least you probably heard about thing that he created called Gantt charts. That's named after him. So basically, he took the idea of Henry Ford and introduced a way of managing various kinds of projects in a sequential manner. So basically, he came up in a way of introducing how the projects could be visualized by using the graphs like here. When you go from one step to another step and maybe, to the very end that you need to accomplish. And this was also very much needed and very much efficient at that time, because a lot of projects needed to have some sort of a standardizations. However, it came end of 20th century, beginning of 1990s, and then of course 21st century that we have right now, and the things started to change. So today we have various things disrupting our markets. So we have things like globalization. So probably even now on the pandemic situation that we have, you might understand, you might see that world, it's not only local, it's global. And people can work from various places. Projects can be done simultaneously in the different locations in the world. So globalization is one of the big factors. Another big factor is the new technology that's emerging. So we have, smart technologies, smartphones, internet, high-speed internet, and various things that's emerging so fast, probably we cannot keep up with that anymore. What was new yesterday, today is probably a history already. So there is a very fast change in the world that we also have. The needs of what customers, the needs of people, it's basically changing so fast. We need to come up with something new to be able to cope up with this. The sequential way of working and standardizing things is not keeping us in the right shape anymore. And another important thing is the customer focus that became much more important in the latest decade. So now customers have an opportunity to give feedback very fast via social networks, via various internet press, directly call your provider and tell him of what's not working, of what you expect. So the customer becomes the very focus of the business today. So all these things led that the sequential way of working and the classical way of working, it's not good enough anymore. It's maybe good enough for some markets. Cars are still being manufactured, and things like Lean and Toyota production system came up to be very efficient today. However, there are other markets, and majority of markets, especially the ones that works in projects, that need some different perspective, different way of thinking and working. And so we come to today, and we come to comparison of what is this defined and what is this empirical way of working. So today I just want to give a bit of perspective to sort of compare them to you so that you feel how is it different. So let's start with defining what is actually the defined way of working. So the defined way of working is a bit of something that was created back in those times of both Henrys, right? It's something that you work step by step. You complete one step, you move to another. You complete one step, you move to third. You complete that, maybe then you move to the finalization. And sometimes it takes time because you need to complete analysis, you need to complete planning, you need to complete designing, then only maybe you do something and then you only have the result. And that stretches out in time, and with the fast changing of the world that we just found out that it is right now, it's not good enough anymore. It's good enough for something. I'm not saying that defined way of working, it's not being used anymore in the market. It is. So I will just give you a couple of cases when you still should use the defined way of working. So just to give you a perspective that it's not only about empirical way of working today. So if your customer, or client, or a stakeholder knows what he wants, he very clearly knows what he wants, then you might be using defined way of working because you clearly know what you'll need to produce. The client ordered a car, you provide him with the car. That's standard. So it still could be worked out in a defined way of working. Then it also should be a fact that the team should know how to build it. So it's not something new. Team knows how to build it, they know the technology behind it, they know the processes behind it, so they need just take something that's a standard and complete it. Then it's fine to use the defined way of working again. The last maybe thing is that you're almost certain that there will be no changes or no major changes at least. So basically everything will go as predefined, as you are used to, team knows it, customer knows what to expect, you take it, you deliver it, everyone's happy. Now, where comes the empirical way of working? Empirical way of working is basically all the way around from the other perspective of all those three things. So if a customer might know what he is expecting, but he precisely doesn't know what actually he needs. He knows that he needs to solve some sort of a pain or some sort of a struggle, or he wants to get some benefits, but he's not sure what the final product would look like. Then the empirical way of working will be something that will be useful. Then another thing is, of course, that maybe it's a new thing. Customer is asking for a completely new thing that nobody actually did it before, or nobody did it precisely what the customer in this case wants, right? So team will find out how this needs to be delivered. So team is not sure what kind of technology they will need to use. Team is not sure what kind of tools they might pick up and use, right? So in this case, it's much more beneficial to use empirical way of working. And then empirical way of working is all about embracing the change. So if you expect that there might be changes in customer needs, there might be changes in what we actually need to do, it might be changes in the technology we use or the processes we use, you also should choose the empirical way of working. And the whole idea here, as you can see, of empirical way of working is basically two things: inspecting and adapting. So instead of getting sequentially, we start off doing something, inspecting how it works, and then after getting the feedback, adapting it to our needs. So inspection and adaptation. That's the backbone of empirical way of working. That's the backbone of Agile itself. And it doesn't matter what kind of industry you work. It might be IT, it might be completely different. It might be in manufacturing, it might be retail. It completely doesn't matter which sector are you in. The same logic holds. And Agile holds the inspect and adapt principles here. So just do something small, check how it works, and adapt it. Now the key word here in the middle, as you can see, is transparency. So all of this is empowered by being transparent on your progress, being transparent with your client about what is possible, what is not. Client should be transparent with his needs and with his feedback. So transparency empowers inspection and adaptation. And this is the key that you should stick to if you want to empower the empirical way of working. So this is the whole idea behind it and the main differences between the defined way of working, of what is sort of sometimes called classical way of working, and the empirical way of working with inspection and adaptation. And just to give you a bit of a more idea of what it actually is, this agile development, this inspection and adaptation, I will use a very classical example. Let's say your client needs a car. Well, he comes to you at least and he says that he needs a car. But if you want to deliver the car in an empirical way of working, you ask him, what is that you need? What kind of problem do you need to solve? Well, he says, I need to get from point A to point B. Then you say, okay, so instead of building some sort of a car and using 5 years for it, let's see what is the most important thing for you. So where would you use it? Well, I will use it in the city to get from my home to my office, as an example. Okay, so this time maybe we will create to you the skateboard or something similar. This will get you from point A to point B, and you can start using it tomorrow. You don't need to wait 5 years for a car. Okay, I'll take it. Then after a week, client comes back and say, okay, it works partly, but I'm missing a steering wheel. It will be much more convenient for me to have a steering wheel. Well, we tell him, okay, now we use another week and we'll build up a steering wheel to the skateboard and you will have something similar like scooter, right? So this is sort of a second iteration that we give to the client. Client tests it and say, okay, this works, but I don't want to use so much manpower. I want it to be more, electrical driven. It's all about ecology now, so let it be electrical driven. Well, then we attach an electrical motor, and now you have an electrical scooter. Very popular today. So client takes it and uses it and says, okay, still working very well, kind of an idea, but I also want to use it on the streets. I want to get faster. I want now to move longer distances. I want to use it on the streets. Well, to use it on the streets, maybe we'll attach to it, I don't know, a body, headlamps, all the things that's needed so to empower this to be some sort of a bike. So now customer has some sort of a bike. It's still electrical driven. We're using the same components here, right? So customer now has a bike, but he says, it's very hard for me to drive on 2 wheels. I would like 4 wheels. So we attach another 2 wheels, and now you have an electrical 4-wheel drive scooter, something like that. So client works, tries it, uses it, and says, okay, very good. It would be very nice because it's small, it's maneuverable, it's everything I need. Just sometimes when it's raining, it's very inconvenient for me because I get wet. So let's attach a roof to it. And then you get a car. So basically, the difference, and the client here says, okay, that's completely enough for me. Even though maybe in the beginning, he came to you and said, I need a Tesla. You ended up giving him a small electrical car. And he says, that's fine. That basically is everything that I actually needed. So what happened here, actually? So first things, we did short iterations, right? We did short iterations where after each iteration, we managed to give a working product to the customer. He managed to take it, use it, and tell him his feedback. So short iterations is how the Agile development works. That's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is that what we managed to get by using an Agile development is fast results. So we get fast results and we can learn from it. Remember, inspect and adapt. We can learn, so what is useful from this? What is used by the client and what is still missing? If it's something is still missing, we can add up in the second iteration. Now, what we've got at the end is actually a customer even finding out himself what he actually needs in the process. And he stopped where he felt that he's happy enough because maybe he spent even less money here. He got the result faster. So you get a happy customer with a result that satisfies him. So, and this is very important. To satisfy the customer in the right way, get him what he needs. Happy customer is another outcome of Agile development. Now, last but definitely not least thing, what Agile development gives you is a happy team. Why? Because imagine that the team, when the client just first came to them and asked for Tesla, they would use a lot of time. It would have been very expensive. They would deliver that to the client, and the client said, yeah, okay, but it's actually a bit much, even more than I expected. So it hurts the morale of the team. Now, they were able, in this iterative way of working, empirical way of working, to deliver what actually client needs, get a good feedback, so it boosts the morale of them as well. So you not only have fast results and happy client, you also have a happy team and a satisfied team because they managed to deliver what's needed and they didn't stress about it. They just received the feedback, they made the changes, and they moved on forward. So this is how the Agile development works. And it can be adopted in any kind of industry. Not only IT as you usually think that it's for IT software development. As in this example, you can see it could be done with the cars. It could also be done with any kind of products or services you're working with. The idea is to work in inspect and adapt manner with short iterations, show fast results in order to make happy customers and happy team. So this is what an Agile development is all about. Okay, so now I would just want to illustrate with some examples of what kind of activities could be done with what kind of way of working by illustrating the spectrum of complexity. So let's imagine that you have a two-dimensional spectrum where on the horizontal axis you have how you need to do it. So do you know how to achieve the project that you're working with? Is it clear to you? If it's clear, it's here at the corner. If it's getting more uncertain, and you will find out, you move further away from the corner. On the vertical axis, you have the what part. So is it clear to you what we want to deliver, what we want to achieve, right? And it's further away from the center, the more uncertainty we have with the what part as well. So in the vertical corner, where it's small uncertainty with how and what, we have a relatively simple project. Simple from the perspective of what could go wrong. So sectors as manufacturing are using and living in this spectrum part very successfully. They use the defined way of working, what we already talked about. They use a sequential way of working. They're manufacturing cars in a standard way. When they create a new car, they just adjust their assembling lines, and you can manufacture a car pretty fast in a pretty simple manner because everything is standard. When we move away a bit more, we have complicated and complex worlds now. Now, what is the difference between complicated and complex? It's not so completely obvious, but complicated, it's something that it's hard to achieve. It could be the same manufacturing of a car, but now it's with some extra requirements from the client that is unique. And complex is something maybe completely uncharted, the new waters that you try to do. You know that it's possible, but now it's complex. So in this area, this is where basically you can say all the project work is operating. So all kind of projects that has a beginning, that has an end, that is unique in a certain way, is more or less complicated or complex manner. And here is where you use an empirical way of working. Here is where you use what we've just discussed. You use an inspect and adapt principle, right? Now, in the very corner where is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns, there also is this red corner where things like usually researches are happening. So not even, empirical inspecting and adapting model really works here, because usually here you work with using some sort of experiments. You're not even sure if it's possible. For example, healing cancer or some space exploration. You don't even know what's actually possible, but you try it. So this is more of a chaotic way of working, but this is just something that we want to try. We don't know what the result would be, but it's by the experiments we try to achieve it. Sometimes I would say some of the startups operate here. Startup companies that are trying a new product, maybe they're not completely happy with what they will achieve, or not completely sure what they can achieve, but they're trying and maybe they're experimenting a bit. Later, maybe moving into more complex or complicated way of working. So for the last part of this lecture, I just want to illustrate a couple of benefits, some extra benefits that empirical way of working may bring to you. An agile way of developing projects or creating new services is actually giving what kind of benefits. So very important thing that I want to illustrate here, it's risk. We talked about fast delivery, we talked about happy customers, but actually very important thing that's usually forgotten and when we talk about why we use the agile way of working or empirical way of working is the decreased risk that we can have. Now, how come it comes to be? Now, imagine, this is, let's say we work in the defined way of working. This is the value, this is the risk, and throughout the time, we move up and we deliver more value with the time, right? So on the time scale, we move up, we move away, and we deliver more and more value. Now, with the defined way of working here, we give the product to the customer only here at the end. So this gray area, this whole gray area is uncertainty that we have. In this whole area, we're not sure if a client will like the product, right? So this whole area is basically our risk. So when we give a product only at the end, so we planned, we designed, we analyzed, we developed, and only then we give it to the customer, only here we have feedback. This whole area for us is in the risk that it was actually a waste of time working on it because maybe client will not like it and we can throw out this whole time away. Now, when we use the empirical way of working, how things change. So with the empirical way of working, we start here and we give to the client a small portion of a product, right? Then we move a bit, work a bit more, give another portion to the client. Then we work a bit more, then we give another portion to the client. And so we continue for a couple of iterations. Now, where is our risk? In each of the point, we receive the feedback from the customer. So we know we only invested this amount here of work that could be not beneficial for the customer. Now, we receive the feedback, we know what we need to change. So another portion of risk which we have, it's only here until we get another portion of a feedback. Another risk is here when we get another portion of a feedback. And so we continue until our client says, it's enough, it works for me now. So as you can see, just by comparing the red areas here and red areas here, how much of a risks we have. And it's much less risks with the empirical process of actually throwing away the work that the team did to the trash bin because it wasn't simply what the client expected. And the biggest value which I actually want to tell is the so-called Pareto rule. Maybe you heard about it already. The Pareto rule says, in general, that 20% of all of our effort and work delivers 80% of value. So it works for various kind of sectors and various kind of working activities. 20% of time we invest usually create 80% of value, or the end value of what we're hired to do. 20% of all of the salesmen in a company usually creates 80% of sales. And this is just general rule of thumb but called Pareto rule. And in this case, it's very much utilized in empirical way of working. Why? Because here, maybe client only needs this 80%. Maybe it's completely fine with him to having 80% of what we envisioned in the very beginning. Remember with the Tesla example? At the end, he needed maybe just a small electrical car, right? But to create that, the team maybe needed to invest only 20% of all the time, which also is only 20% of all of the money to get it achieved. So the Pareto rule says to us that empirical way of working might deliver the majority of the result by investing just 1/5 of the whole time that we would maybe use here. So this is the main benefits, and this is the main way of working that is defined by empirical way of working. This is the backbone and what is an Agile built upon. So any sector you're working in, any industry you're working in, you can just use those principles. You can envision that this helps you to lower risks, create more value in a shorter period of time, and this basically can empower you to just be more efficient and more successful in your activities, in your businesses or services that you provide. So this brings me to the very end of the presentation, but this is not the end of the series that we have. As I said, I just wanted to start in a high level, but in the next lecture, my colleague will take it from me and just introduce to you a bit more about how actually the planning in Agile way works. Because now you might have an impression that from what I told is that we basically don't do planning, right? It's only done in defined way of working, but that's not true. Planning is also done in Agile way of working, in empirical way of working. We just need to do it a bit differently, and this is what will be presented in the next lecture, so stay tuned. And now, it was great to speak with you. My name is Šedys, and if you want to talk more about Agile various topics, just get in touch with me on LinkedIn, and I believe we can definitely use some touch points with you and discuss this theme because I'm completely passionate about it. So thank you today, and stay tuned for an upcoming lectures. Bye.